Hey, son.
Hello.
10 years since Jules passing. It doesn't seem that long ago. Still tough.
Yeah, it's always a tough one to remember, and always going back to Japan. We saw a nice tribute helmet from his good friend Charles Leclerc this weekend, which was nice to see. But yeah, I mean, you think about it, what Jules Bianchi was sort of thought of as a driver, he was expected to be at or above where Leclerc is now. So, he is a very talented young driver. Also, from the same part of the world, Monaco area. It's always tough, I guess, when somebody passes away, but definitely a young driver just starting out his career in F1 and high expectations for him. Already 10 years since then is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. All right. Are you ready, son?
I'm ready to go.
Hello. Welcome to Hard Compound, American take on Formula One. Just finished watching Japanese Grand Prix, Suzuka. It was a fun race. Max pretty much owned the race, but from maybe not number 2 down, maybe from 3 down, it was a good race. We had a number of overtakes, timely pit stops, different strategies, different tire strategies, especially. I think if you're a new fan, if you're one of the new fans coming into F1, I think you might just think, oh, it's racing, fastest car, best driver. And it's hard sometimes, I think, to even understand, the importance of pit stops and when you stop, of tire strategies and managing tires. This was the rare race, I thought, where that was almost obvious, I think, even to new fans. So, Patrick, son, what's your big takeaways from the Japanese Grand Prix?
Yeah, so this was a fun race. I think Japan always is good to have good weather, see the track as is. It's a fun place to race. There's a lot that can happen and that did happen in this race. The Red Bulls were pretty dominant. I think that's sort of to be expected at this point in time, until proven otherwise, expect them to win the race. But for the rest of the field, it was pretty fun. The top 4 teams all have both drivers finish in the points in Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, and Mercedes. So that only left 2 spots, for points for other drivers. And I think there were 2 drivers that really stood out and were rewarded with points in Alonso and Yuki Tsunoda. So that was fun to see, especially Tsunoda in his home race, collecting a point for a pretty middling Racing Bulls car.
That team is not good. The car doesn't look good, but Yuki has looked good. I mean, he's been in the points. Has it been every race this season? I don't remember, but it seems so. Plus, just getting in the points in Japan, that was great, But you mentioned, Red Bull looked good as always. Max looks good always. Sergio does not, but this week he did. So, I mean, you think of the folks who really shone: Sergio, Yuki, Alonso, maybe to a lesser extent. What do you think?
I think Norris Sainz looked good again. I think he's
Sainz, yeah.
proving why he has been at Ferrari and maybe why they should not have opted to bring in Hamilton in his stead. I mean, I guess to that point, right? We're talking about Yuki having a pretty good start to the season. Obviously, it's early, only 4 races in. He is currently sitting 3 points back of Lewis Hamilton. 3 points.
Wow.
Lewis Hamilton on 10, Yuki on 7.
That's shocking. I hadn't looked at that.
That's concerning, I think, from Mercedes and Hamilton and potentially Ferrari.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say it's clear. We keep assuming Mercedes will get better because they historically have as the season progressed. However, that was usually them starting from the front and just sort of extending their lead, sort of what Red Bull has been doing the past couple of years. I did not notice that Hamilton and Yuki were that close in points. I mean, you think the best cars right now, you got to go Red Bull, then Ferrari. Who do you put next?
McLaren seems currently better than Mercedes is.
But they're a Mercedes customer. I don't see how that shouldn't even be possible.
Unit, so they're doing something
right.
better, aero, smarter setup the drivers are doing better. There are things that
I think they've got a better lineup. I mean, Lewis is past his prime. George is not that guy. George is good, but he's not that guy. He's not the guy. But yeah, that is sort of, Mercedes should not be behind McLaren Mercedes.
Yeah, I mean, currently Norris alone is outscoring Mercedes. Just looking at the points right now. I know it's early on in the season, only 4 races in, but I think you got to look at Mercedes and say, that's a tough one.
That's
You realistically probably should be the number 2 team, and it is not looking good for you right now. So,
on the other hand, Ferrari is looking good. Somehow, the team always seems to sabotage Leclerc. It's just sort of the extent of the sabotage. Was it minor or major? But he did well overall. Sainz again putting in the work, doing really well. Had Sainz not missed a race, I mean, he could be. I don't think, because Max got all the points today, but he'd be in second, nipping right at Max's heels, I believe.
Because he's 9 points back of Perez, having missed a race. The rookie Ollie Behrman, what place did he come in? Well, I think he got 6 points total. So must have been a 7th or 6th. Yeah. Regardless, Sainz is only a couple points back of his teammate, less than 10 points back of Perez for second place, having missed a race. So he has started out the season, with a point to prove, and he's definitely gone out there and done that.
Before we talk about Sainz and folks with something to prove, what about folks with a lot to lose? I mean, once again, Williams, they screw over Logan Sargeant. They basically make him use Albon's less than 100% car. I'm all for Williams being ruthless. I'm all for F1 teams being ruthless and saying, look, he's getting the job done. You're not. We're giving him the car. We're giving him the best of everything. But if you're going to be ruthless, it better work. And it hasn't worked. Albon didn't get points again. Logan didn't get points again. Obviously, Williams doesn't get points. I mean, they're a laggard. They're back there with the steak sour team. Maybe at some point it's sort of like, a football coach coming into a bad team. It's like, hey, we're going to be ruthless. We're going to call everyone. We're going to get the best as we can be and sort of build that culture, which I understand if you're trying to build a culture. That's going to take years. I mean, right now it's like, look, you're not getting it done though. At some point, I'd like to see results. And so far we have not. I mean, it's hard to imagine though that Williams was so far behind, was just in such disarray, that you can have someone who I think is quite good, James Voles, and he seems to be doing both what I think is necessary and just doing the harsh, ruthless thing, but no results. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, that is a team that I think, once it was taken over, you sort of expected a boost, at least a come up to be somewhere near like the Alpines or Aston. I mean, granted, Alpine is maybe even worse this year than Williams is. But in general, the expectation was that they would improve and improve rapidly and drastically. That hasn't happened at all. It's extremely disappointing. I think we can keep going back to this expansion of Formula One and the rejection of the Cadillac Andretti team and really look at it and say, this is unacceptable. Like, I don't know. I think as fans, we have to demand better from the sport as a whole. And if you're looking at a team that's trying to come in, put in a ton of money to make the sport exciting, more entertaining, and more competitive, and you reject that and just allow shit teams to keep being shit, that is a slap in the face of all of the fans of Formula One. So, I think all these teams that have been at the bottom for so long and have not shown any desire to improve at all, like a Williams or a Haas or even like the Sauber team, I don't know. Maybe you should just get booted, or maybe your entire, ownership group. Like, no, you don't get this anymore. That's not allowed.
There was this show I used to watch, I don't know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I don't remember. Time passes much too quickly. It was these British fellows, and their wives had obviously kicked them out of the house. And so they spent time either in their yards or in their sheds. They would build like rockets or motors just something ridiculous. And it was fun. They pieced this stuff together, with duct tape, and their spare change. And it was a great show. Then they created an American version of it. But the American version of it was basically sort of, they tried to make it similar in concept, but it was like, look, these guys are Hollywood stunt guys. They have real money. Their rockets are, their rockets are going to work. Their engines are going to work. You can like either of those. But it's been years now. And the Hollywood stunt guys and the American money has now, been thrown at the British guys. And they're still not getting it done. Claire Williams has been out for years now. They've had big private money for years now. And I didn't mean for this show to be, let's pound on Williams, but I mean, they're garbage. And you're right. It's like, look, you can't constantly be coming out of the points race after race after race, year after year after year, while as you're saying, hey, there's this big money team. It's like, hey, we'd like to be part of this. It's like, no, you can't. It's like, you know what? I want to see the best drivers, the best cars, the best teams. You got to get it done. And Williams has a special place to me. It's just they've been around for so long and their history is so great. But it's like, yeah, and they're not just the only one. I mean, I always, Yuki aside, it always seems like RB, whatever they call themselves now, they've gone from being Red Bull's sister team to, Red Bull's looking to, jettison them. Sauber, whatever, stake, kick, whatever they're calling themselves now, they're sort of waiting until Audi comes along, But you're right, we fans deserve better, especially when you want the American audience and the American viewership and the American TV money and the American track money. And then you're saying, oh, no American teams. We don't want that. No real American teams like Andretti.
Yeah. Ultimately, it's disappointing to see just how woeful some of these teams are and continue to be without any real promise of showing more. And, I think we mentioned last week that, maybe Perez isn't actually doing badly at Red Bull. Maybe it's just that Verstappen is so good. Maybe Claire Williams wasn't actually doing that badly at Williams. That's just a fucking awful team. Like, with no money and no direction, like, I don't know. They seem to not be able to come back from the brink. They're still walking off the edge. And I don't know. I think it may take more than just some private equity money to come in. It's going to be like a complete overhaul of the entire R&D center, everything. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm still hopeful. I care especially a lot about Williams. If Audi comes in and merges, or as we assume takes over Sauber, that's another historic team that I think is going to get a sort of influx of money and talent and commitment that I think we fans deserve. But yeah, some of the stuff is disappointing, which I did not want this to be because I thought this was a fun race.
Yeah, it was good overall. Lots of fun stuff, pretty tough for some of the drivers, some of the teams, but a lot of good positives coming out of it. There was a lot of fun racing for those last points positions. Tsunoda ultimately took 10th, but Stroll was on a mission for part of that. The Haas drivers, Magnussen and Hülkenberg, were both sort of scrapping for that. It was good fun to watch. Bottas, looked pretty spicy on new tires, but it just seemed like they petered out pretty quickly for him. Overall, though, a lot of fun to watch.
All right, switching to the soft compound. Does Ferrari have regrets, Patrick?
Yeah, I think they do. But, that's maybe not something that they can avoid at this point. They've decided, Leclerc is our guy, and we're going to bring in who's currently seen as the best Formula One driver of all time in Lewis Hamilton. I think that has a lot of good value in it. That said, the way each of those drivers are currently driving for their team, it seems like there's a lot of talk from inside probably, and certainly from outside saying like, maybe it's not a good decision.
I think there might be some regrets. I think 2025 Lewis Hamilton and 2025 Carlos Sainz will be about equal in ability. That's going to be tough. That's always tough to discern. But, they always brought in Hamilton or, planned to bring him in to help them sell Ferraris, sort of as a brand ambassador. And Lewis wanted that, and Ferrari wants that. Open up new markets, sell more cars. But I don't know. Every now and again, Hamilton will make a dig at his own team. And I'm like, this is a bit of a powder keg. This could backfire, as your brand ambassador. He may not always say what you want him to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is pretty clear that Ferrari has certainly the tightest leash on their drivers in terms of public statements, just the overall character that the drivers are allowed to show. It's certainly the most toned down, the most PC of any group of drivers. And that's for a very specific reason. When you're at Ferrari, you are a Ferrari man, and that is it. You are nobody outside of Ferrari. And so I agree with you to some extent that might be challenging for Hamilton to work with. I guess it goes both ways. But overall, I think if they're performing well, and they seem like they're on the up so far this season, so potentially it continues next season. If that's the case, I think Hamilton, he's all happy to be there and will do his part. And I think will certainly do his part on track as well.
Who do you think has more pressure on them? Logan Sargeant or Daniel Ricciardo? I ask this because, we just assume this will be Logan's last year. He's had his time and he does not seem to be improving. He's not in a great car necessarily. But if you notice during this race, Daniel crashed out early. But it would just sort of seem like this race, this weekend, anytime there was something to do with Ricciardo, it happened to be bad. And every time the cameraman would then pan to Liam Lawson, waiting in the wings.
Yeah. I saw a lot of memes about that, actually. The cameraman knew what he was doing at this very moment. Yeah, that was very silly. I personally believe that right now, Ricciardo has a hotter seat than Logan Sargeant. I think Sargeant, I do believe this is his last season. I think Williams will keep him until the end of the season, regardless of kind of what happens. I don't think that's the case for Ricciardo. I think this weekend, everything needed to go right for him, and none of it did. And, next race, if it's not 100%, if he doesn't come in the top 5, I don't see him sticking around for another race after that. Red Bull's pretty quick to pull the trigger. If you're not getting it done, you're gone. And they already have someone behind him who has proven, capable enough of not only competing with his teammate, Yuki, but of scoring points in a middling car. So
yeah, they don't have to worry about giving up any championship fight. They're too distant. And with Ricciardo, he's well liked. He's great for the brand. He's great for the team, for publicity. But the reason is because he's fun. But it doesn't work if you're losing, especially if you're not doing well week in, week out. That's not fun, no matter what your personality is like. So I think you're right here. I think, I'm not sure there's more pressure on either one, but I just think the reality of the situation is that Logan will last longer this year. I think you're right than Ricciardo.
I think they're both done, by the end of the season. But, I don't think they're returning, I guess, to Formula One in 2025. I'll say that. Either one of them.
Yeah. Logan is American. Ricciardo is Australian, I'm sorry. I saw this tweet by, I think his name is Vincenzo Landino at Japanese Grand Prix. The 1990 Japanese Grand Prix was the last F1 race with no European on the podium.
Huh.
Yes. So I know that's pretty remarkable. Who do you think If we were to have a non-European podium this year, who do you think would be on it? I'll go first.
Okay.
It's got to be Oscar.
Yeah.
He's great. McLaren's doing well. I'm going to go with Yuki.
Ooh.
He's doing well. You never know what's going to happen. I think I've got to go with then the Canadian Lance Stroll, because Lance, Lance, he's peaked. He's not going to get any better, but that's a good car and a good team.
Yeah.
So Oscar, Australian, Yuki, Japanese, and Lance Stroll, Canadian. What do you think?
I think my 3 would be, I would take Oscar. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. Stroll definitely has potential to get on the podium, especially in that car. It seems like right now that's sort of competitive with the Mercedes. So there's definitely possibility to get, close up to that podium. And then the last one, I think that is, to me, obvious. He was on the podium today, is Sergio Perez.
Okay, let me just say, my bad. How did I forget Sergio Perez? I think I was thinking of people very unlikely to make it, So funny. So yes, of course, Sergio. Yeah, I screwed that one up.
But yeah, Yuki has been driving well. If something crazy happens, that seems, very like a possibility. The only other person is, well, I guess there's a few other drivers, right? You have Albon.
So Sergio with Red Bull, that seems obvious. Now, of course, I don't know what I was thinking. Ferrari, European. McLaren, you have Oscar. He's Australian. Next, you have Mercedes, both European. Next, you have Aston. So that Lance Stroll, right? Let's say we then go Racing Bulls. So that would be Yuki is Japanese, and Daniel and Liam, I think, are both Australian. Is he from New Zealand? Okay. What next? Williams, Albon, do we consider him Thai? Okay, and Logan Sargeant, American. Then when we go to Stake, Bottas is Finnish, but Zhou, Chinese. And then Haas, of course, and they're both European. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Alpine.
The Alpines,
and, both French.
European. But none of those guys are getting on the podium this year.
Right.
Based on the car that they're in, there's got to be a lot of dumb shit that happens at the front. That
I stupidly forgot about Sergio just because he was so good, and I was, for whatever reason, thinking of bad teams. But Sergio, Oscar, and Lance, because that car has its moments.
It's possible. That seems like potentially reasonable.
And then you have Yuki, because that car, I don't know if that car does, even in just utter chaos, if he could get that in there. Although Gasly got the predecessor. So
that's true. I think at that point, that car was still better than what it is now, though, compared to the rest of the field.
A similar sort of thought experiment I watch and write about NASCAR and F1. And Joe Gibbs Racing in NASCAR, he does very well. Folks my age know Joe Gibbs was a great NFL coach. He won at least one, and I think multiple Super Bowls. He then left and he formed a NASCAR team, which at the time seemed weird because the money in sports, including the NFL, was nothing like it is today, but there was still quite the disparity. He retired from NFL after achieving the highest level of success, repeating it, went on to found a NASCAR team, and it does quite well. I believe one of his drivers is Denny Hamlin, who wins all the time. But the reason I brought that up is because it's like there's so much money flowing into sport. And if you own a team, you're golden. If you're a top player, you're probably golden. You're going to get some unbelievable contract. For everybody else, though, it's probably a good living, good life, but it's not at all in the same league. So, for example, I saw, this is a hell of a long runway to the story, isn't it, Patrick? I saw Toto Wolff's net worth, $1.5 billion estimated. No wonder there seems to be no pressure on the man. No wonder he just sort of another poor race and says, yeah, we're looking into it. Christian Horner, meanwhile, busts his ass and has every race for 20 years. He is, in my opinion, better than Frank Williams as a team principal. He is the best team principal of all time. I think he has contributed as much to F1 and has as much impact on F1 wins as almost anyone. His net worth, I said Toto Wolff was 1.5 billion. Christian Horner's is 0.05 billion. So about 50 million if I've done my math right, which 50 million puts him in the 99 point something percentile, but it's not billions. Right. But it's not billions. So like, I mean, those rumors of like, we hear all these rumors of Christian Horner misbehaving, but then you hear these sort of backstories where it's like, oh, but what's going on is a lot of politics about maybe getting rid of him trying to sort of have his own team. We heard this with Gunther Steiner for all his years of poor performance. Gene Haas finally got rid of him when he sort of demanded a piece of the action, ownership in the team. And it's hard to blame these guys. Toto Wolff's worth 1.5 billion. Why? Well, because he's a part owner of an F1 team. And he got in many years ago with Williams. So he's now worth billions, over $1 billion. That's private jets everywhere whenever you feel like it. Okay. Christian Horner, 50 million. I mean, that's a different reality. I don't know. Do we have any thoughts about this? I just saw that and I was like, what the heck? No wonder these guys are balking, because they're just, especially now. I mean, we were watching F1 when in America, a lot of the races weren't even shown. Nobody we knew watched it. Now, I mean, there's just billions flowing into the economic impact. They analyzed F1's impact on Las Vegas, one race. I mean, just so much money. And, a guy like Christian Horner, who's busted his ass his whole life in F1. And it's like, well, look how well you've been rewarded. You're richer than just about everyone who's ever lived. Yeah, but you're still not living up in Cloud City. You're closer to the folk down with us in the mines,
Yeah. There's a lot of money to be made and a lot of money to be hoarded at the very top. I don't know that I have any real thoughts or perspectives on that, but it sort of reminds me of how the soccer league here in the US, MLS, how they started sort of enticing very popular, very accomplished soccer players to come join the league. And it has had a major impact on the growth of that sport in this country and then on the league itself. But the one example I can think of is David Beckham was like one of the first guys to come over, join this league. And he was basically, his contract with the LA Galaxy and then with MLS basically gave him the opportunity to create a new expansion team for MLS. Like whenever he wanted to, he could buy in at, the low price of whatever it was, $100,000 or, probably a couple million, but he was able to do that. And now he owns the Inter Miami MLS team, which is, one of the most popular, I guess I would say now. They brought over, Leo Messi, who everybody in the world knows, and some other, world-class soccer players. And, it pays a lot more to own teams, to be sort of on the inside than it does just to play for or be the coach of any of these teams. So yeah, I'm with you. It's totally understandable why, some of these team bosses are trying to get a piece of the pie.
Yeah. If you have some sort of ownership stake in a platform that's taking off, I mean, you're golden. And it also makes me think, there's so much money flowing into the sport. And also that money has to go somewhere. And, like here in the US, IndyCar, which I grew up on, is just lagging so far behind. It's lagging behind NASCAR in the US. It's lagging behind F1 even. And you think maybe some of that big money that Andretti and GM had, all this private equity money, these Hollywood stars wanting to get in on the act. Christian Horner saying, what the hell? Toto Wolff's got $1.45 billion more dollars than I do. Or Gunther Steiner saying, I built Haas, not Gene Haas. I built it. You think, maybe they'll take over Indy or try some alternative. I'm not sure this will succeed, but, Indy could become the sort of an F1 alternative. Now, under the we've been done told you category. We've been done told you for months now that Seb was coming back. Everybody said no, Seb is retired. But I think it was just this week, Bernie Collins, and she's always fun to listen to. She said Sebastian Vettel is actually considering returning to F1. And we know he's been testing cars, not F1 cars, but, for like Le Mans and things. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think he actually will come back ever, Patrick?
I think that if he wants to, some team will probably give him a shot. I don't see the point, but, since everybody loves Seb Vettel, for some reason, it's weird when he's winning everything, everybody fucking hates him. And then he doesn't win anymore and he turns into a hippie. And everyone's like, this guy's the greatest person ever. I don't get it, but whatever. In 5 years, when Max, joins Alpine, isn't winning anymore and, turns into a kind, caring fellow, everyone's going to love Max, even though everyone hates him right now. But anyways, I don't know. I can certainly see Vettel coming back. I just don't know what team he would drive for. Like, who would pick him up? I could see, like a Haas booting Magnussen, because he's really not been all that good. Being like, hey, Seb, want to drive for us? And, could be. Or like a Sauber, being like, you know what, Joe, not getting it done.
Yeah, I think that one could work, because I think to bring back Vettel, as you said, it doesn't really make sense really for a team, and maybe not even for him, other than he misses the sport and, the limelight and just driving cars fast. But with Sauber or Audi, he could have kind of a Lewis Hamilton type brand ambassador role, a significant one. So that could work. Now, we also been done told you that there was going to be, or could likely be, a Leave Golf type takeover of F1. Leave Golf is I believe they get money from the Saudi Sports Fund. I'm not exactly sure, but they're throwing billions around to sort of take over professional golf. We had this discussion of what might happen if that same fund or similar tried to take over F1. Now, that has not happened yet, although we only had the discussion a few months ago. But Bahrain, the Kingdom of Bahrain, or somebody associated with it, I believe they've now fully acquired McLaren. I think Aramco has or is in the process of buying Aston Martin. I mean, this is getting close. Although I will say this, there's a downside to some of this, certainly for fans and probably for the athletes, because I've watched Leave Golf events and there's no purpose to them. It's sort of like I've watched Formula E events and you think, these are great drivers. This is amazing engineering, amazing cars. These teams are really working hard, but it's like, why does this exist? I don't need it. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on this, Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, my only real thoughts are, I don't like how this global sport is congregated in one place. And, 8 of the 10 teams are in the UK or based in the UK. And, okay, so we'll have a Middle East takeover, Saudi takeover, or, whatever it is, Bahrain, some of these different kingdoms with a ton of basically oil money. Okay, they take over the sport. Then the sport is all congregated, at the top level in one place. I would love it if the sport naturally just sort of spread out. People from all over the world can enjoy it, but can also be a part of it. I've been saying that for a long time, but I wish that, it wasn't dominated by one place or person or entity. So, it is what it is, but I would love for it to spread out more than it is.
I'm with you. Like, there's now 3 races in the US. Montreal is about a 3-hour drive from a couple cities in the US. That's 4 races in a locus. There's no real F1 presence in the US. The Haas team isn't really located in the US. They've got some administrators here. F1 is putting a lot of money into Las Vegas, so that could change. We'll see. But you're right. Then there's Japan, Australia, China now. We haven't had a race in China for several years. Yeah, it might be nice to have it sort of outside of just England, let's say. I know they're going to hate that, but
It's a global sport. I mean, why would you want everybody to enjoy it and everybody who wants to have the opportunity to be a part of it? I think there's so many people from across the world, drivers, passionate fans who want to be, engineers or team bosses or whatever. It's like, well, guess what? You have to pick up your life, figure out how to move to Europe and, start from the bottom there in a foreign place to get anywhere in the sport. And I don't know. I think it would be nice if there was an easier way for people to take part.
If they made it easier for young engineers, folks on aerodynamics, materials science, strategy, that would be great. But also the drivers. I saw an interview recently with Kyle Busch. He's one of the winningest NASCAR drivers of all time. And he was saying an F1 driver could come into NASCAR, like say Kimi Räikkönen, Jensen Button, and it's like, let's see what you got on track. Get in the car. Let's see what you can do. Okay, now go and do a race. If Kyle Busch was to go over to England and say, I want to race for F1, it's like, okay, spend the next 2+ years getting your super license. He's like, come on, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, that's another reason, I guess going back to the leave discussion, right? There's been a lot of tension between the FIA and F1. And, maybe F1 says, screw that governing body. Let's create our own or work with somebody else. Maybe they nix the super license rules. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I think there's certainly possibilities that kind of an imminent takeover of the sport is on its way.
Across the line. That's the segment where we predict the top 5 for the next race. The next race is in China, Shanghai, in 2 weeks. There has not been a race in China, I believe, since 2019. Should be fun. The rules for Across the Line are very simple. Trust me on this. We predict who we think will be in the top 5. If we're correct, we get 1 point for that driver. If we get them in the right spot, we get 3 points for that driver. Once one of us takes a driver, he is off the board. Bam. That was my best ever Across the Line description.
So good. I was actually laughing during the race because, as an American, I get the Sky Sports feed. And these guys, Anthony Davidson and Crofty, were trying to explain what the undercut is. And they were like, oh, it's so simple. We'll just explain it to you. I'm like, dude, you're fucking overcomplicating the shit out of this. Like, why? It's so simple and straightforward. Like, why are you doing that? And it just made me think of trying to explain the rules for Across the Line. It seems like it's always overcomplicated, but
I don't know why.
Trust us, it's very simple. It's a very simple game that we play.
Now, there is a sprint next race. We do Across the Line. We don't take that into account. So what is the current standings of Across the Line, Patrick?
Okay, current standings after 4 races. So, I don't know, where does that leave? 19 to go. I have a lead, 11 points to 6.
Ooh, wow, I'm like the Daniel Ricciardo of Across the Line. I'm the fun one, but woefully underperforming, right? Funny. Okay, all right, well, let's see if we can rectify that. Who goes first?
Well, you have first pick this week.
Ooh, they haven't raced in China in years. The last time that was back in the days where Lewis would win everything, Mercedes would win everything. So it was Lewis, Valtteri, then Seb. Back when Seb and Ferrari gave us hope for about 3/4 of a race and about 3/4 of the season, but we all knew it couldn't last. Well, he's been dominating almost every race. I'm going with Max.
That is a fair pick. I think I'm going to say, we've got, what was it? 2 Red Bull wins, then a Ferrari win, and back to Red Bull. So I'm going to say we get another Ferrari win. I will take Carlos Sainz.
Ooh, Carlos instead of Charles. Okay. Well,
Top step of the podium. He's the only one that's beaten Verstappen in the last 22 races. So
You're right. You're right. And he wants that big money contract because he's up at the end of this year. All right. What about number 2?
Man, lots of other good drivers. But, Perez to start the season has been performing well. I think I'll take him P2.
All right. I'm going to go with Charles at 2 and 3, Alonso. He's been really just a beast.
Nice. Let's see. I think Lando gets on the podium in the next race. And then I'll say Mercedes has a fine race. Lewis Hamilton into the top 5.
Nice. I will go with his teammate George Russell for 4th, and 5th, Lando's teammate Oscar Piastri. So I have Max, Charles, Alonso, George, and Oscar.
That's nice. I am going to take a crazy shot. Back in the day when we were still racing in China, it's always Lewis and Valtteri. So I'm going to take Valtteri's teammate, the man from China, Zhou, to finish in the top 5.
Awesome. That'd be awesome. So you have Carlos, Sergio, Lando, Lewis Hamilton, and Zhou Guan Yu. Awesome. Any crazy predictions, Patrick?
My crazy prediction, I don't think is all that crazy. I'm going to say Red Bull this season re-signs Perez to a 3+ year deal,
Ooh.
closing the door on any opportunities for young drivers to come through that system. And, shutting the door on Carlos Sainz returning to the Red Bull team as Verstappen's teammate. So he's going to have to find somewhere else to race.
That's a shocking one if that happens. Mine, we hear these rumors about who's going to replace Lewis at Mercedes will be Alonso, Carlos Sainz, their young driver Antonelli. I think that's the wrong rumor to focus on. I think we should instead focus on Mercedes' sinking ship, and George will leave it. So he will go to a team I do not yet know. All right. I want to thank you all for listening to everybody's most beloved father and son F1 podcast. Remember to subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend. And we are lights out.
See ya. Thanks for listening.
You just finished listening to Hard Compound, recorded in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and around the world.